Dean Carson here. This is DCarsonCPA on the MFC lines. This slide is entitled Data Problems in the AP lines. Now, AP may seem like a small point. In fact, it's just a line within your balance sheet, or maybe a couple of lines if you break it out. On the liability side, you've got assets, liability, owner's equity, and you've got AP up here on the liability side in your balance sheet. Now, from your balance sheet is an interrelationship with expenses and your P&L. So basically, you've got your accounts payable and the data problems in the AP lines. This is to cover some of the details and overview. The rest we can help you where we meet you. This is just some broad lines of awareness for today and what we have in. The accounts payable is a subledger where it collects invoices that are basically payments you owe for goods and services exclusive of employment and payroll and those type of things. These are payments for perhaps consultants, for perhaps utilities, for purchases of goods that go into providing your services to your clients, those type of things come in here. An invoice typically comes in on one of two channels. It can come in as a paper invoice through the mail or as an electronic invoice on the IT lines, including email. You've got in accounts payable a clerk, many clerks, depending on the size of your business, or just one accountant, picking up this invoice data, and basically they have a responsibility to code and confirm this data as it comes into your business, because the whole challenge of accounting and the whole point of data problems in the AP lines is typically one of having insufficient information, which delays other processes, because when you deal with accounts payable, you're dealing with, in my estimation, some 70% of your overall activity and financials, which grows off of accounts payable. And so a very important point to remember is that any complications in the AP lines for knowledge and awareness slow down other points of awareness within your business. And within my 70%, I might be including other points too, like payroll, but it kind of depends on your business model, where your expenses lie. That's just an estimate from my point of awareness. But to point in the gravity, the AP is a material piece of your overall financials, so make sure you get it right and there's good information in the lines. We start here. There's an invoice. An invoice comes in again because a client, if you're a bookkeeper for them or if you're doing accounting for an individual or something like that, is out in the field. They have this mobile ability to transmit back to you pictures of expenses, pictures of great things they do. It's a fun part of mobile technology. Or the bank lines from clients can transmit to you expense statements on your expense lines, like your different credit cards and bank cards and things of that nature, all which comes back to you, needs to be picked up by clerks over here and correctly coded into the system. What typically happens when the coding goes into this subledger of accounts payable, which then feeds your GL, is that basically you have exceptions and delays. If everything's good and goes in, well then basically you've covered your dates, your ledger codes, your amounts that are in there, your reference fields, your classification, and you've answered the critical questions that anyone has of who, what, when, where, how, and why were my people out there spending money in the economy. If you've answered all those questions, and the reason why you have to answer who, what, when, where, how, and why is for your own awareness and control of your business and for your responsibilities on tax compliance, because the expenses you have typically are also caught up and are also brought into your tax return, which requires two levels of an explanation. And a third, if you have shareholders. If you're in a private business, you may have more flexibility of your interest, but when you come to the tax lines, you better understand who, what, when, where, how, and why. So there's a bit of crossover of the tax knowledge working with accounts payable and accounting there. And then basically what you want to do is think about, well, how does this data come into my business? How does it traverse from invoice to clerks, from the entry lines into the coding and confirmation process to effectively meet exceptions and delays, which are products of communication lags between entry personnel and either clients or people out in the field that are incurring expenses. And typically the people that are the furthest out on the line are your salespeople and your senior executives, because senior executives have a lot of demand on their time. Your business line managers are easier to reach, but everything within this cycle process exists in a business of the smallest to the largest size, and so you'll just change the nature of how you look at it as you increase in magnitude and size. The magnitude may change, but you'll still have fundamental problems of this nature in a business of any size. You come down here, and basically what you've got is you've got clerks, the clerks up here, taking in the information, getting an invoice, entering it to accounts payable to code and confirm, bring it to the GL via the accounts payable subledger. And what you need to make sure is happening is that they're in good communication with the folks over here, or that the folks over here are given a good upfront to, hey, this is what I do. Basically, these are the lines where the expenses come in. And the clerks over here are the owners of the first step of entry of accounting data. They're basically coding it into your accounting system, hopefully doing so correctly with good guidance. So I say communications is always a critical part of the accounts payable cycle, and whether it's from the client or fellow employees out there spending money lines into the clerks, there's basically always AP problems that correspond to communications and efficiencies. I can always find ways to help you on a close, help you on improvements by just engineering what's happening in the AP lines. There's another level, which is a lot of times in the close, I'll talk about in another place, how people deal with accounts payable and closes. That can be a complication that can slow down your financial reporting lines, delaying your receiving a final balance sheet and P&L. And what you want is timely, relevant information. And the more you delay your close, the less timely your historical data is, and that's more of a complication. So the last point's in. Communication cycles are critical to the data problems in AP lines. If you don't have good communications, if people fail to enlist teamwork between senior management and accounts payable personnel, they have inadequate or insufficient information, which creates delays in loading ledger data, which ultimately populates balance sheet and P&L lines. Last point in the line, your closes, which I've discussed, it's about getting timely, relevant information, so make sure your accounts payable clerks have good information for coding and confirming. It'll help you on their subledger and ledger uploads, which will in turn speed up the processing of your balance sheet and your P&L. And these are all lines that are becoming more and more interesting with the cloud and ability to use mobile technology